NEC 210.52b3 addresses small appliance branch circuits in dining rooms and similar areas. It states that small appliance branch circuits serving two or more receptacle outlets, including any receptacle outlets intended for luminaires, clock receptacles, or outlets serving food waste disposal units, shall be rated 20 amps. The outlets in kitchens, pantries, breakfast rooms, dining rooms, or similar areas shall be supplied by not less than two 20-ampere branch circuits. This means that dining rooms need at least two 20-amp circuits to supply the receptacles in that room. This requirement is to ensure there is adequate capacity for all the small appliances that are likely to be used in these areas. When considering the customer's request to have one of the dining room outlets switched for a lighted china cabinet, the primary consideration is whether the switched outlet will be used exclusively for lighting. If the switched outlet is used exclusively for lighting the china cabinet, it would be considered a receptacle outlet intended for luminaires and therefore allowed in the same circuit according to 210.52b3. However, if the outlet is used for any other purpose, such as plugging in a small appliance, it would violate 210.52b3 because it would no longer be exclusively for lighting. This is because the small appliance circuits are intended to serve small appliances, and any use of the circuit for other purposes could overload it. To ensure compliance with the NEC, it is recommended to install a separate 20-ampere branch circuit for the switched outlet if it will be used for any purpose other than lighting. This will ensure that the small appliance circuits are not overloaded and that the lighting circuit is dedicated to its intended purpose. Additionally, it is advisable to clearly label the switched outlet as for lighting only to prevent accidental use for appliances. This will help to ensure that the outlet is used only for its intended purpose and that the small appliance circuits are not overloaded. When installing a separate 20-amp circuit, it is important to follow all applicable codes and regulations. This includes using the correct wiring and overcurrent protection and ensuring that the circuit is properly grounded. It is also important to test the circuit after installation to ensure that it is working properly and that it is safe to use. In addition to the NEC requirements, it is important to consult local codes, which may have additional restrictions. These codes may vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, so it is always best to consult the authority having jurisdiction before making any changes. By following these guidelines, you can ensure that the dining room receptacle circuits are installed in compliance with the NEC and that they are safe to use. This will help to prevent electrical hazards and ensure that the electrical system is reliable and efficient. It is important to note that the NEC is a complex document, and it is always best to consult a qualified electrician if you have any questions or concerns. A qualified electrician will be able to assess the specific situation and provide guidance on how to comply with all applicable codes and regulations. The NEC is not a substitute for professional judgment. The information provided here is for general guidance only, and it should not be used as a substitute for professional advice. Always consult with a qualified electrician before making any changes to your electrical system. The NEC is updated every 3 years, so it is important to stay up to date with the latest version. This will ensure that you are using the most current information and that you are complying with all applicable codes and regulations. The NEC is available for purchase from the National Fire Protection Association. The NEC is a comprehensive document that covers all aspects of electrical installations. It is important to have a good understanding of the NEC in order to ensure that your electrical system is safe and reliable. By following the guidelines in the NEC, you can help to prevent electrical hazards and ensure that your electrical system is operating properly. The NEC is a valuable resource for electricians, contractors, and homeowners. It provides the information necessary to ensure that electrical installations are safe and compliant with all applicable codes and regulations. The NEC is a living document that is constantly being updated to reflect changes in technology and industry best practices. It is important to stay up to date with the latest version of the NEC in order to ensure that you are using the most current information. The NEC is a valuable tool for anyone who is involved in electrical installations. It provides the information necessary to ensure that electrical systems are safe, reliable, and compliant with all applicable codes and regulations. The NEC is a resource that should be consulted whenever there are questions or concerns about electrical installations. It is a comprehensive document that covers all aspects of electrical systems, from wiring and overcurrent protection to grounding and bonding. The NEC is a valuable tool for ensuring that electrical systems are safe and reliable. It is important to use the NEC correctly and to consult with a qualified electrician if you have any questions or concerns. The NEC is not a substitute for professional judgment. The information provided in the NEC is for general guidance only, and it should not be used as a substitute for professional advice. Always consult with a qualified electrician before making any changes to your electrical system. The NEC is a valuable resource for ensuring that electrical installations are safe and compliant with all applicable codes and regulations. It is important to use the NEC correctly and to consult with a qualified electrician if you have any questions or concerns. NEC 210.52 B3 also specifies the types of areas that require at least 220 ampere small appliance branch circuits. These areas include kitchens, pantries, breakfast rooms, dining rooms, or similar areas. The intent is to provide sufficient power for the numerous small appliances commonly used in these locations. Therefore, any areas with similar functions or appliance usage should also adhere to this requirement. When installing receptacles in these areas, it is essential to ensure that they are supplied by the required number of 20 ampere circuits. Overloading circuits can lead to overheating, trip breakers, and potentially dangerous situations. Using the correct size wiring and overcurrent protection devices like circuit breakers is critical for safety and code compliance. The NEC also provides guidance on the placement of receptacles in these areas. Receptacles should be installed so that no point along the floor line of any wall space is more than 24 inches, or 600 mm, measured horizontally from a receptacle outlet in that space. This requirement ensures that appliances can be conveniently plugged in without the need for extension cords, which can pose tripping hazards and increase the risk of electrical shock. Understanding the specific requirements for small appliance branch circuits in dining rooms and similar areas is crucial for ensuring safe and code-compliant electrical installations. Consulting the NEC and seeking guidance from qualified electricians are essential steps in this process. Remember that local codes and regulations may add additional requirements or restrictions, so it is always best to consult with the local authority having jurisdiction before commencing any electrical work. When dealing with electrical installations, safety should always be the top priority. Following the guidelines in the NEC and consulting with qualified professionals can help to ensure that electrical systems are installed and maintained in a safe and reliable manner. This will protect occupants from electrical hazards and contribute to the overall safety of the building. Small appliance circuits are usually wired with 12 American wire gauge copper conductors and protected by a 20 ampere circuit breaker. Aluminum conductors can be used, but they must be sized appropriately to carry the required current. The use of ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI, protection is often required for receptacles in kitchens and other damp locations to further enhance safety and prevent electrical shock hazards. The requirements for GFCI protection are outlined in NEC 210.8. Another important consideration is the proper grounding and bonding of electrical equipment. Grounding provides a path for fault current to flow back to the source, causing the circuit breaker to trip and energize the circuit. Bonding ensures that all metal parts of the electrical system are electrically connected, preventing voltage differences that could create a shock hazard. The NEC provides detailed requirements for grounding and bonding in Article 250. Proper grounding and bonding are essential for electrical safety and should be carefully implemented in all electrical installations. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is crucial to ensure that the switch is properly rated for the intended load. Switches are rated for the amount of current they can safely carry. Using a switch that is not rated for the load can lead to overheating and failure. It is also important to use the correct type of wiring for the switch. The wiring must be sized appropriately to carry the current and must be suitable for the environment in which it is installed. When installing a switched receptacle, it is also important to consider the placement of the switch. The switch should be located in a convenient and accessible location. It should also be located so that it is not likely to be accidentally turned off. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the type of lighting fixture that will be used. A lighting fixture must be compatible with the switched receptacle and must be installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the energy efficiency of the lighting fixture. Energy-efficient lighting fixtures can save money on energy bills and reduce the environmental impact of lighting. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the aesthetics of the lighting fixture. The lighting fixture should be chosen to complement the decor of the room and to provide the desired level of illumination. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the safety of the lighting fixture. The lighting fixture must be installed in a safe manner and must be protected from damage. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the maintenance requirements of the lighting fixture. The lighting fixture must be easy to maintain and must be designed to last for many years. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the cost of the lighting fixture. The lighting fixture must be affordable and must provide good value for the money. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the availability of the lighting fixture. The lighting fixture must be readily available and must be easy to obtain. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the warranty of the lighting fixture. The lighting fixture must be warranted against defects in materials and workmanship. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the reputation of the manufacturer of the lighting fixture. The manufacturer must be reputable and must have a good track record of producing quality lighting fixtures. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the customer's preferences. The customer's preferences must be taken into account when selecting the lighting fixture. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the local building codes. The local building codes must be followed when installing the lighting fixture. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the National Electrical Code, NEC. The NEC must be followed when installing the lighting fixture. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the safety of the installation. The installation must be safe and must not pose any hazards to the occupants of the building. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the reliability of the installation. The installation must be reliable and must not be prone to failure. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the maintainability of the installation. The installation must be easy to maintain and must not require frequent repairs. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the cost of the installation. The installation must be affordable and must provide good value for the money. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the availability of the materials. The materials must be readily available and must be easy to obtain. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the warranty of the materials. The materials must be warranted against defects in materials and workmanship. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the reputation of the supplier of the materials. The supplier must be reputable and must have a good track record of providing quality materials. When installing a switched receptacle for lighting, it is also important to consider the customer's preferences. The customer's preferences must be taken into account when selecting the materials.